What's up, everybody? How's it going? How's it going? Let me make sure everybody hear me good. All right. All right. First one, first episode. First episode. Let me actually record this because let me see. I think I done forgot how to record. All right. What just happened? All right. Congratulations. Thanks. I'm trying to figure out how to record all of a sudden. I can't. Oh, can't record while live. That's fine. All right. Here we go. Welcome to Tip the Scales, where I give you tips on your scales and tails, because obviously I'm from QB's Tails and Scales. All right. So, how are we going to make this last more than 30 minutes? So there was a few questions that I got sent via email. So I'm going to put that banner up. If you ever have any questions, where are they? There you go. If you ever have any questions, you can just send me an email at info@qbstalesandScales.com. The question or the subject can just be podcast questions if that's what you want the questions to be for. So if I get podcast questions, I'll just wait for the podcast to answer them. And if you have any questions that you need me to answer urgently, you can probably just shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. That'll probably be the easiest way to get hold of me. And with that said, it says we have 5 people watching already. So checking the comments, everybody's good. How's everybody doing tonight? Or yeah, it's still technically be tonight, even if you're on the West Coast, because it's only 3 or 4 hour difference. So actually, it'd be afternoon. But yeah, so we have a lot of questions. I know it's the first podcast. I have 12 or 10 questions, maybe 10 questions. I think it's 10 questions that I got asked, and I'll ask them all on the podcast or I'll answer them all on the podcast. So I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Thank you for asking. Um, you're doing great. That's good. Everybody doing good. That's like the best thing that could happen. Everybody doing good. Everybody doing the best they can possibly be doing with the circumstances with the way the world is right now. But everybody doing the best they could possibly be doing. That's the best thing. So, like I said, I have about 10 questions that I got asked via email. So the way I want to do my podcast is I want to just do have a topic essentially around the questions. So all the questions that I got were about bearded dragons. So essentially that's what the topics of today's video is going to be. So it's going to be mainly bearded dragons. If you have any questions that maybe you can think of while we're doing the podcast, you can put them up in the chat, and I'll answer them right now. So if you have any questions, put them up on the chat. And without further ado, let's go ahead and answer the questions from the email. So let me go ahead and share my screen because I made a little presentation to show off my questions here. So here we go. All right. So obviously the Tip the Scales podcast, why not have an intro for that? Now, the questions, as I said, they're all bearded dragon related. So I try to put them in order of what the topic in the bearded dragon related questions were. So the first set of questions is about breeders in general. And then the last set of questions is going to be about essentially my favorite types of bearded dragons or things that I think of bearded dragon related that have nothing to do with the breeders per se. So the first question, let's get to it. So I put this question first because I'm actually dealing with a situation right now where there is an unethical breeder. So the question is, if you had to guess how many breeders are unethical, if I had to guess, there's a lot of unethical breeders out there. So what makes somebody an unethical breeder? An unethical breeder is essentially someone who breeds knowing that they're doing the wrong thing. That's an unethical breeder. So they could be essentially breeding the wrong genetics together. They could be breeding genetics like wiblets to wiblets, or zero to zero, or zero to het zero, and whatever the case may be. But that's an unethical pairing because it causes the bloodline or the lineage of that morph to essentially get weaker because you're the the morph is being crossed more closely together than if they were het to het, which would be more outcrossing essentially. And then you have people breeding leatherback to leatherback, dunner to dunner. And while dunner to dunner is not the worst thing, it's still not something I would recommend because dunner to dunner essentially creates bearded dragons that are going to be more prone to holding food in their mouth or storing food in their throat, and that can cause an issue down the road. So that's essentially why I say don't do dunner to dunner. Now, I will say dunner to non-dunner can still create bearded dragons that hold food in their throat, but not as often. So the question is, how do you want to be known for to be as a breeder who does this and all of your dunners come out with issues as far as holding food in their throat, or do you want to be someone where they produce dunners and every once in a while somebody will say, hey, my dunner holds food in their throat for an hour or however long it is. So that's essentially how what an unethical breeder is. Another example of an unethical breeder, which is what I'm dealing with right now, is a breeder that knows that their bearded dragon is sick and still chooses to sell said bearded dragon. And I'm not going to say any names or anything like that, but this breeder, and this is not the first breeder that's done this. There's a lot of breeders that have done this where they will sell you a dragon that's sick just to get it out of their collection. And most of these breeders, they don't have a refund policy. So if you are in the market for a bearded dragon, look at the refund policy. Is this going to be someone that will offer you a health guarantee for a certain amount of time if something goes wrong? If not, I personally will not do any business with that particular breeder. So, for example, myself, I give a 30-day health guarantee. A 30-day health guarantee is pretty standard for bearded dragons, mainly because it takes a long time for a bearded dragon to actually get used to its new home. And even some bearded dragons, they arrive in the same day they're eating, the same day they're drinking water, and the same day they're doing everything they're supposed to do. And then sometimes you have bearded dragons that 20 days in is when they start eating. 20 days in is when they start letting you handle them. So it's more so of what is the most it could take for a bearded dragon to get used to its surroundings, get used to its new home. And that's essentially why I do a 30-day health guarantee. Now, there's a lot of breeders that do that. There's some breeders that do 2 weeks, or some breeders that do 2 months. It's really just based off what they feel is right. There is no wrong answer. The only wrong, or I guess there is some wrong answer. The only wrong answer is not having a health guarantee or a refund policy in place whatsoever. And this particular person that I heard of, this is not the first time that this has been brought to my attention. And it's pretty funny. I don't know how or why I have turned into the bearded dragon police. I didn't want to be the bearded dragon sheriff, I guess, because you would have to be voted in or whatever. But I didn't want to be this person. But people will message me and say, "Hey, I got a bearded dragon from this person, and this is what's going on. Is this something that I should be getting a refund for, or is this something that I could just handle myself?" And 9 times out of 10, if you have a bearded dragon that actually is showing signs of illnesses or showing signs of deformities or neurological disorder or whatever the case may be, ask for a refund. Send the dragon back, give the dragon back, whatever the case may be, and ask for a refund. Because at the end of the day, let's say you spend $200 on a bearded dragon. If you go and take it to the vet, immediately you're going to spend $60 just for the vet visit. If they have to do any testing, you're probably looking at another $60 per test. If they have to do any injections or anything like that, any medicines, I mean, it can rack up. So this particular person that I'm dealing with right now, he has bought 2 dragons for $2,000 total, not each. And he had the first dragon, he got it, and it wasn't eating, it wasn't doing a lot of things it was supposed to do. But obviously, he knows that they take a little bit of time. And then eventually, he started noticing that its poop was irregular. And then um, don't know how the timeline went, but he ended up getting another bearded dragon from the same breeder. And this one, from the get, it was sick. So he took both dragons to the vet. They both tested positive for parasites. They both tested positive for adenovirus, which is not something. I don't know if I've talked about this in a video. It's not something that's common. So the breeder in particular that sold these dragons has said that this is a common thing. ADV is everywhere. So every dragon has it, which is not true. It's actually uncommon. Not every dragon has it, and there is a lot of people that will say that they have a dragon that has ADV, and this dragon essentially is going to show signs, stargazing, or I think that's what they call it, where it will stare up at the sky. And honestly, it doesn't end well if they actually have ADV and show symptoms of ADV or adenovirus. There are going to be some dragons out there that carry adenovirus and they don't actually show any symptoms, and that is where the uncommon part comes in. If it was just dragons showing the adenovirus symptoms, it would be rare. But the ones that carry it is why it makes it uncommon because there's a lot of carriers out there, and the adenovirus gets passed on via birth, so or not birth, but reproduction. So if the female lays eggs and she had adenovirus, all the babies will have adenovirus, and then also through stool contact. So if they're in a cage with another dragon that has adenovirus, then that dragon will also get adenovirus. So that's why it's also important to do quarantining when you are buying new dragons. Keep them away from your dragons. Wear gloves when you're handling that dragon so you don't actually have any contamination or cross contamination in your collection. So, how many unethical? I don't know. That took me a long time. Did I answer this question yet? But how many unethical breeders are there? A crap ton. Too many, in my opinion, and it's honestly sad. You can go on Morph Market. I'm not the type to report any listings on Morph Market, and typically I'll just message the person if I see something wrong with the listing, and I'll say, "Hey, this is wrong. This is what's wrong with it," and then I'll give them a reason why I think it's wrong. Obviously, if they choose to still do whatever they want to do, that's up to them. But I saw a bearded dragon where you could tell that it was sick. You see it in its eyes, you see it in its skull. Its skull is, I mean, you can see the skull obviously, and that's not good. If you can see on the back of the head the fat pads are gone, that's a big red flag in a bearded dragon. If the fat pads are sunken in, that's a huge red flag that you have something wrong. And I saw the dragon had the it was bad, so I had to report it. I didn't even want to message the person because most people that can sell something like that, they probably don't care. They probably are gonna read your message and never reply. So I just went ahead and reported it because it's not something that anybody should be out there selling. So there are a lot of unethical breeders. Um, and just to say, there are some also that are bigger breeders that are well known that are also unethical breeders. Um, I don't consider myself a big breeder. I consider myself medium tier. I produce probably like 300 dragons every year, which is nothing compared to how many dragons are out there in the world. And I mean, out of the 300, this is obviously how it always works. There's always going to be a percentage that don't make it. They have failure to thrive. That's what it's called, failure to thrive. And out of the 300, I probably 30. And out of the 270 that are left, there's probably another 30 that are just slow growers, and I have to sell them as pet only. So there's a lot of things that go into breeding bearded dragons, and that's why there's so many unethical breeders out there because they don't follow those rules. They just go based off how many did I produce, how much can I make, and let's sell as many as I can right away. And that's essentially what how a lot of red monster breeders got into it. They started breeding and breeding and breeding just to make $2,000, $3,000 animals, got as much money as possible. And now that the market's gone on the red monsters, you can find them for $500. They're no longer breeding. So what does that say? There's a lot of people out there that were doing red monsters that are no longer doing bearded dragons. So there's a lot of unethical breeders out there. Next question. That took me what, like 10 minutes to answer that question. Hopefully it goes like that so we can make this last an hour. All right, next question that I was asked. Let me see. Looking at the chat here. Oh, so I'll go and answer this question that somebody asked in the chat here. And before I answer the one on the screen, it says, how hard to have an animal delivered in the wintertime? The wintertime is the trickiest time to ship a animal, period. So they're depending on who you talk to. Now the guidelines for shipping, the general guidelines are if it's over 38 degrees Fahrenheit in your area, then you can have a dragon or reptile shipped to you. If the person that's shipping your dragon, if their temperatures are over 38 degrees, they're able to ship the dragon. So both locations have to be 38 degrees or higher. So depending on who you ask, some people will go with the high being 38 and some people will go with the low being 38. I personally just go off the high because you're going to use a heat pack anyways, and more than likely you're going to ship the dragon, or in this case the dragon, ship it at the highest temperature of the day, so 3, 4, 5, 6 in the in the afternoon, and essentially that's around when the warmest temperatures are. So when you're shipping this dragon at that time, you're dealing with the highest temperatures, and the entire time from then it's going to have a heat pack. And by the time it arrives at the location where it's going to, even if the temperatures are 32 for the low, the dragon's not going to experience those temperatures because the heat pack is going to be inside of the box. So the and the other thing, there's a lot that goes into it, but if you are preparing this package in a room temperature facility or in your house or whatever, more than likely, once you have the heat pack in there, that box is going to get up to 90 degrees relatively quickly because those heat packs take about an hour to actually heat up. And so if you are, for example, I live an hour from my hub, so I have to schedule my pickups to deliver or to ship packages. So I put my boxes together 3 or 4 in the afternoon. They pick them up around 5 or 6. So by the time I put them together, by the time they pick them up, and this animal is now in transportation, they are now experiencing the temperatures that are cold. By that time, they are no longer going to have a chance to experience those temperatures because they are in a warmer box. That heat pack is ready to go, is doing its thing, and that's essentially what matters is how was it prepared and what are the temperatures from the destination and what are the temperatures from the place that it's leaving. So that's how it gets a little bit harder to ship during the winter time, but it's not that hard. Like this week for me, it's going to be in the 40s and the 50s this week, so I'm able to ship to a lot of places this week because a lot of places are also going to be over 38 degrees Fahrenheit this week. So um, there you go. And next question was, who is a breeder you would like to collaborate with or like to buy a dragon from? So I've always been a proponent on buying bearded dragons from people that are just getting into breeding. Two reasons why I do this. One, you get to determine if the person that's breeding is actually aware of what they're doing. So in the process of buying this dragon, you're also asking the questions that a normal person would ask. What was the pairing? How old is this dragon? How much does it weigh? Can you show me pictures of the parents? Blah, blah, blah. All these questions that a normal person would ask, I ask. If they don't answer any of these questions, then I skip that breeder. And I personally, I wouldn't recommend that breeder either. Now, if they go through all of these questions and everything looks good and appears all right, I will buy a dragon from them. This in 2024, I bought dragons from 3 new breeders that I've never done business with before, and everything went just as expected. So does it matter how long they've been doing it? Not necessarily. It only matters how well they do it and how knowledgeable they are. Now, as far as collaborating with or that I would like to buy a dragon from, I've always admired everything that Yellow Room Reptiles does, Fairy Tale Dragons, and Phantom Dragons. So Yellow Room Reptiles, they man, they've been around a long time. Before I started breeding, they were breeding. So I don't know how long they've been around, but they've been around for a long time. They've gone through a lot of things where they've lost entire collections. They've lost almost here in the last few years. They had a fire in their facility and lost almost everything. And it's been a while for them. It's been taking a while for them to get back to breeding regularly like they were before. But even that hasn't stopped them. They're still pumping things out, amazing things out without fail. And Fairy Tale Dragons, I have bought so many dragons from Fairy Tale Dragons that I don't even. Uh, just from when I started breeding, I used to live in Florida. So let me just go back to that. I used to live in Florida. Yellow Room Reptiles and Fairy Tale Dragons are in Florida, and whenever I was there, I bought dragons from them all the time. There was also a another reptile breeder down in Florida that no longer breeds reptiles, Naughty Reptiles. They produce the best coral reds that I've ever seen in bearded dragons. Now, what is a coral red? A coral red is just a fancy way of saying it's a bearded dragon that's orange and red. But it was just so pure. It was amazing. So they called it coral red. So I'm using their term because that's what they called it. So, but yeah, Phantom Dragons, they're MVP, most valuable breeder out there. They brought most of the morphs that we see in the U.S. They brought them in. Zero, they brought in Wiblets. They brought in. They find new morphs and everything. Now, I'll say a fourth one. Dragons Den Hurt or Kevin Dunn. He was the founder of Dunner. I buy stuff from him too all the time. Not here recently because he's brought a lot of Red Monster into his collection, and I'm still very weird about Red Monster purchasing. So I'm just going to leave it to the people that want to dabble in it and just go with it. And whenever I see a red that is nice, I'll buy it. If it happens to be from Red Monster lineage, that's fine. I'll just have to make do with what I got because none of my reds, the male reds that I have, are from Red Monster lineage. So it's more so just what is out there right now. All you can find that's red is Red Monster lineage. So you just got to go with it. But as far as which breeders I am fond of and would like to collaborate with or like to buy dragons from, now there's not a lot of collaboration that happens in the bearded dragon community unless you're just getting started. But collaboration or buy from fairy tale dragons, yellow room reptiles, phantom dragons, and dragons den hurt. So all four of those people are phenomenal. If you ever just choose to buy a bearded dragon from any of them, you'll always have a good experience. So there you go. Let's see. Chat is still going. All right. So let's see. There is one thing that I want to mention real quick before I get to the next question. Which I'll just put up the next question here. So just a segue, because I just talked about red monsters. Before I answer this question, there are, like I said, majority of the reds that you can find right now are from red monster lineage, and there are a lot of people breeding red monster into other things. So they're putting red monsters into yellows, they're putting red monsters into wiblets, putting red monsters into zeros, and you just more than likely you're going to have to find something that has red monster in it if you want to breed, because it's hard to get away from it right now, and it's just everywhere. I mean, you can go on Morph Market right now, and I think I don't know exactly what the number is, so I'm just going to look it up real quick. But I think there's over like 6,000 bearded dragons or something on Morph Market right now in the U.S. and Canada. Let me no, I don't know why I said 6,000. 516. Maybe I just added an extra digit in there. So 516 right now. And if I search by the term red monster, let's see how many come up. 516 and 151. So over a fifth of them are red monsters. And I would say probably half of those bearded dragons out of the 516 are just normal pet quality bearded dragons. So they're not going to be anything crazy. So at least 250 of them are going to be crazy looking bearded dragons, and at least half of them are red monsters. So if you are a breeder like me or trying to get to where you have a collection that's nice, that's something you admire, and you're looking at the quality bearded dragons out there, and there's only 250 of them or 300 of them out of the 516 on Morph Market, then you're going to deal with, are they red monsters? And if you are in the market for a red monster, you got to ask these questions. What was the pairing? Was it red monster to red monster? Great. It was. All right. What was the pairing of the parents? Was it red monster to red monster? It was. I'm just going to skip on it. So what I've noticed is if people are breeding red monster to red monster, and then their offspring are breeding to another red monster, and their offspring is breeding to another red monster, eventually, which is what happened, the line gets a little tainted, and you have a lot of health issues. And there's been health issues with red monsters for as long as red monsters have been in the U.S., and there's still health issues with red monsters now, which is why a lot of people are outcrossing them. So now I'm going to answer this question. Even though some people have outcrossed red monsters, would you still recommend avoiding them entirely? Yes and no. So it's funny because I told my wife somebody asked this question and she said yes and no, and I was like, how does she know what my answer is going to be? So that's pretty funny because she knew exactly what my answer is going to be. So yes and no. Is it good to avoid them? Yes. Why is it good to avoid them? Well, because you have to ask those questions. How far have they been outcrossed? Is it 2 generations, 1 generation, 3 generations? Once you answer those questions, then the next answer is no, you don't have to avoid them. If they have been outcrossed successfully and they have been outcrossed the right way, then you don't have to avoid them. For example, high desert dragons and sapphire dragons. So Jason and Steven, they have been outcrossing bearded dragons or red monster bearded dragons for almost all of 2024. I don't think they did many red monster to red monster pairings. If not, maybe they didn't do any. So I know that Steven has had a lot of red monsters crossed with German lines and Spanish lines, and he's creating some crazy reds out there. I have one 75% or no, she's a 50% red monster, and she was crossed from German lines, and perfect. There, she's perfect. And then I also have two from bucket list reptiles. I was outcrossed, so they're I want to say 50% red monster, but yeah, outcrossed with German lines as well, and they're phenomenal. So, like I said, it's hard to get red dragons right now that aren't from red monster. So you have to get what you can when you can. So I if it's someone that I know and it's someone that I've done work with before, or talked to before, then I'm not gonna have any problems buying from them because I know they'll take care of me. And if something happens, and they know most people know how I feel about red monsters anyway, so they know that if I buy red monsters from them, it's probably because I feel like they're doing the thing right. They're doing the breeding right. So do you have to avoid them? You don't have to avoid them. You just have to ask the questions and hope you get the best answers possible. And hopefully they show proof that they're not, closely related with all the other red monsters out there. Because what was it? 2022, 2021 or something like that when red monsters first came to the US, almost every single red monster came from the same person. So RM Beardies out of where are they? Malaysia or Hong Kong or something like that. China. They all came from them back then, and that's where I was seeing people complaining immediately. Every single dragon that they got from those lines was having issues because the dragons that arrived to the U.S. maybe they were good because if I'm a person in China selling you two, three, four, $5,000 dragons, I'm only going to sell you the best of the best. And if you go to any exporter of red monsters out in Asia, you will notice that most of the red monsters they sell are large. They're older. They're established. They're not selling you any babies because the only way you know if a dragon is a good, healthy dragon is by letting it grow. And if it grows and it does everything it's supposed to do till almost adulthood, because most of them sell sub adults, just because that's really the only way to know that you have a good, healthy dragon is by waiting until they're a lot bigger. And that's what they're selling. They're selling sub adults, and then by the time they get here, the ones that you picked out, those are the healthy ones. They're not going to sell you anything that's trash. They're going to sell you the best of the crop. And then you start breeding here and you start dealing with what they did not tell you they were dealing with, all of the dead babies and all of the babies that didn't grow and all of the babies that were having issues and neurological issues, organ failure because of them not outcrossing. And even if they tell you that these dragons are not related, more than likely you don't know. And like I said, you just spent $5,000 on a dragon that got exported to you, or you're importing from China or whatever in Asia, and now how are you going to send that back? How are you going to get your money back for that? More than likely, you're not. And there's also there was a lot of people that were working with um, they were importing red monsters and they were holding them for people, quarantining them essentially here in the U.S. And there was a lot of them that got caught breeding people's dragons before they sold them, or before they shipped them out to the buyer, or swapping them out with not as good quality red monsters. And now you have all that stuff going on with red monsters as well. There's a lot of negative history with red monsters. So, like, hopefully y'all got that. Hopefully y'all understood that. Somebody sold a bunch of red monsters here in the United States. So let's say somebody in China. They were working with somebody here in the US to ship them all of the dragons, and then they were going to spread them out and ship them individually to each person that bought a dragon. In the process, they also quarantined them. They also waited to make sure everybody was healthy and the traveling and everything didn't hurt anybody. And in the same same boat of 30 days or whatever to quarantine them, they also moved. Let's just say they grabbed somebody's male that was nicer than their male, and they paired it to all their females. Now they got the best red monsters, and that was happening. That was happening at least from one person that I know of. So yeah, there's a lot of bad things going on with red monsters that are used to. I don't know about now. There's a lot of people keeping it hush, and I don't actually talk to a lot of people anymore because they started breeding red monsters, and I got vocal about it, and they blocked me because that's how people are. So um, yeah, that's how the bearded dragon community is. Start talking about people, or you start talking about the things people are doing, and you have negative remarks. All of a sudden, you're the bad guy, even though what they're doing is not right. So um, there you go. Hopefully that answered the question. So don't have to avoid them. You just have to be careful who you buy from, and you have to be careful how far they are outcrossed. So you don't necessarily have to get 25% red monsters. You can get 50% red monsters or 75% red monsters if they are outcrossed correctly. And I I didn't buy a 75% red monster. I was given a 75% red monster, and he didn't make it. He had failure to thrive. When I got him, he was probably, I want to say, 12 or 15 grams, which is normal to ship dragons at that size. Um, but he did not eat that much. He probably ate 2 or 3 bugs every day. And the other dragon that I got at the same time, she probably, by the time he passed away, at still 15, 16, 17 grams, she was already 50 grams, and she was the same size when I got him. So um, it's failure to thrive. That's essentially what happens. And it could have been just that the entire trip, transportation from where it was to coming here, did something bad to him, and he just never recovered. Or it could have just been that he wasn't outcrossed 100%, and he was one of the unlucky few to have the issues that are in red monsters. So yeah, so yeah, somebody said there's more issues with the red monster breeders or culture than actually the red monsters, and that's probably very true. It's not There's nothing wrong with the actual animal. There's just everything that goes into producing that animal. The people that are producing those animals, those are the people that are doing it wrong, creating you an animal that is unhealthy or having going to have issues. So personally, the red monsters, if I had the money and I know for a fact this red monster is not going to have any health issues, I 100% would spend that money because they look phenomenal. Um, right now, like I said, you can find one for $500 to $1,000 versus back then, whenever they started coming in, $3,000 to $5,000. It was ridiculous. I've actually seen some red monsters sell for about $300 on Morph Market. Um, Actually, I want to say during Christmas time or New Year's time, somebody had $1,000 red monsters for $500. They had them 50% off because they were trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Because even though they may be worth a lot of money, it takes a lot of work to keep a lot of bearded dragons. So when I say I produce 300 bearded dragons a year, I don't produce 300 bearded dragons at once. I space it out. Like if you've watched my breeding plan for 2025, I'm going to do 5 females at the beginning of the year, 4 or 5 females middle of the year, 4 or 5 females at the end of the year, and then the last quarter I just kind of weighed in based off how much I did and if I have any room for more babies at that moment. So that's essentially how I do it. The most I've ever produced was about 270 babies, and that was a lot of work. I'll tell you that right now. It was a lot of work. I'm by myself. I don't have nobody else to help me, so it was a lot of work to feed 270 bearded dragons and also take care of the bearded dragons you have, and at the same time take care of the ball pythons, and at the same time, deal with the ball python babies and worry about the marketing and all that. There's a lot of work that goes into breeding reptiles, people. Um, it's all fun and games what you see from people posting and all that, but deep down inside, they're all probably hurting. They're all probably hurting a lot from having to deal with all those animals, but it's rewarding. It's also rewarding at the same time. So it is what it is. So let's see. Next question. Nobody else on the chat saying anything? All right. So this question in particular. So if you all don't know what Chroma is a new morph that came out in Asia. And so first, I just want to say there's a lot of new morphs coming out. ever so often, and they don't all make it big, and they all don't make it to actually becoming a morph because it's not something that is reproducible. So, do you think chromas will be the next big thing in the community? The first clutch of golden chromas is incubating at the moment, or so he claims. I don't know who he is, but they are the US's first chromas. What are my thoughts on the chromas? What is my thoughts on this whole thing? Um, there's a lot of morphs out there. Personally, for me, I don't work with any morphs that I don't find fascinating. There was one morph that I particularly saw and I found fascinating, but the person was one of the people breeding red monsters, and this particular morph that they found was also in the red monster morph, and essentially, or the red monster lineage, and essentially, I didn't want to work with it until it got outcrossed. But at the same moment, that person didn't like what I was saying, so they blocked me. So I don't know how far it's came, or if they're even still working on this morph. But the morph was called Whiteout, and essentially, it created a colored head, and the rest of the body had no color, and that's essentially what Whiteout was. Now, Chroma, I'm not sure what chroma is. I saw some pictures of it, and it doesn't appear to be anything extravagant. It almost looks like this the color is fading a little bit, and it's not something that I find fascinating. I have some dragons right now that they have a yellow head, and their whole torso and rest of the body is faded. So it's not something new. It's just something that somebody found and started reproducing, and now they have a marketing term for it, chromas. And it's it's hard to say. Now there's one thing out there in the bearded dragons that I 100% love and I will never get enough of, and that's a paradox. But you can't replicate a paradox. You can't reproduce paradoxes just by bringing paradox to paradox. People have tried. It's failed. Nobody has been able to figure out how to do it. So, is there a lot of things out there that nobody knows about? Absolutely. There's probably right now, I want to say maybe 4 or 5 morphs out there that people don't really know about because they're just starting to break ground and people are actually starting to figure out if it's recessive, if it's incomplete dominant or dominant or whatever the case may be, line bred. They're just now starting to figure that out. So that's where most people don't know about it. So for me, like not knowing what the chroma is. So somebody said, here we go. It's a red colored head and then it has golden spikes along the body. Which they say they feel is a really high expression paradox. Which, based off the pictures that I saw, I'm not 100% sold on the paradox statement there because I've seen them do it over and over again. Like they have multiple pictures of it done, so it can't be a paradox thing, but it almost looks like it's something that they're just line breeding. But also, it happens to be with red monsters, and it could also be the same thing as whiteout, but not as severe, and therefore um, who knows what's really going on. So I won't say that it's going to be the next big thing until I see it become the next big thing. Nobody, whenever red monsters, I started seeing red monsters, and I was like, I asked the people how much they wanted for. They were like 5 grand, and I was like, nah, ain't no way nobody's going to buy these dragons for $5,000. And sure enough, here's a flood of 100 red monsters coming to the U.S. And I'm like, where do people find all this money? There's like a $500,000 of red monsters just coming into the US. And I was just like, this is going to end up being the worst thing for bearded dragons possible. And kid you not, it's one of the worst things that's happened to bearded dragons because now everybody wants a red monster. Nobody wants a zero. Zeros are still pretty popular, but nobody wants just like a hypo red dunner that's not a red monster, even if they're only paying $300 for it instead of $3,000 for it. It's ridiculous the way people are right now with the red monsters. And I hate to say it, but the way the economy is right now, I don't know how anybody can justify spending $1,000 on a red monster when you have a perfectly good red dragon right next to it for $300. But no, it doesn't have that red monster name. So it's so weird how people are right now. So somebody else said they've seen the chromas with different levels of color. like silver, gold, white, and some with red or reddish head. So that's essentially what a chroma is. It just has multiple shades of different colors on it, but it's also faded. Like there's a lot of faded look to it, and maybe eventually they'll be able to work in more color into it. But as of right now, it doesn't look anything special to me. And like I said, it's in red monsters, and I'm not going to be working with it, so I don't want to work with it if it's not unless it's being outcrossed. And for it to be in a red monster, that means that line hasn't been outcrossed enough for there to be a new morph in that line, and now you're dealing with chromas or whiteouts or whatever. And now you're line breeding again in that already tainted line to produce these chromas and these whiteouts. It's not going to end good. But if they figure it out and if they start out crossing it and it comes to the US and it starts becoming more popular and actually starts looking good, maybe I'll work with it. But I never got on the red monster bandwagon. I don't see myself getting into anything else that's not appealing or fascinating to me. Like I said, I only breed things that I find fascinating. I don't breed things just because people want it. Like I don't really like breeding zeros because I personally don't find zeros fascinating. They're just a white or gray animal, and there's no color to it. There's no pattern to it. It's kind of dull, but people like that. So I don't personally have anything against zeros, and I don't care if you want zero. I'll produce zeros because I like weeros. Weeros, on the other hand, are pure. They're white. It's hard to find a weero that is not white, um, unless it's not like a hypo. So hypo zeros also gray, but hypo weeros and hypo zeros, you put them next to each other, you will 100% pick the weero over the zero every single time if you're looking for pure whiteness. And it's crazy how white they are compared to hypo zeros. And that's essentially why I produce zeros because I'm producing weeros. And the only way to produce a weero is by doing zeros and wiblets in the same pairing. So you may not end up with any weeros. You may end up with only wiblets and zeros, but it's just all part of the gamble that you're taking on breeding for weeros. And somebody mentioned Stardust. Stardust is another morph in Europe that is taken. It's been out for about 2 years now, but it's a recessive. I'll get if I knew all these tops were to come up, I would have put pictures of all this stuff. But it's a recessive Dunner-like bearded dragon, but it doesn't have scales like Dunner. So it still has the spotting like a Dunner, and it still has pattern like a Dunner, but it does not have the scales like a Dunner. They're not straight up. The beard scales don't go the opposite direction. Everything else is normal about that dragon in terms of the scales, but it's a recessive Dunner-like morph. And if it's like a Dunner and it's harder to produce because it's recessive, that's not going to be something that people are going to find fascinating, essentially. Now, obviously, there's going to be people that want to work with it because it's a new thing, and that's perfectly fine. But if somebody wants something that looks wacky and they see a Dunner next to this Stardust, they're going to look at it and say, well, what's the difference? And then you're going to have to explain it to them why one's worth $100 and the other one's worth, $2,000. And they're going to be like, well, no, thank you. I'll just take the $100 one. It's it's the same thing, or it's not the same thing. They just look similar. They're not exactly the same. They look similar, and it's super weird how it works. There's a lot of things out there. Like I have produced leatherbacks from non-leatherback parents. I have produced Dunner-like animals from non-Dunner parents, and it's just there's just so much going on out there that you'll never know exactly what you're getting unless you know the lineage all the way back as far as you can of that bearded dragon. So personally, that's another thing I find myself doing a lot is if it's not something I produced, I'll ask about the parents, I'll ask about the grandparents, and I'll ask about the great grandparents if they got it. So I'll go as far back as they'll let me. But that's just something that I personally do, and you can't do that a lot with people selling you lion bred animals because more than likely the parents are cousins, the grandparents are cousins as well, and the great grandparents are siblings, and then the great they're all siblings as well, and then you are just buying dragons that are too closely related. Like I know I live in I'm not even gonna say it. um, I live in Kentucky. All right, we don't do that here. I don't know. At least I don't think people do that here. They might. I think it's more of a. I'm not going to say that either. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Let's go to the next question. Um, all right. So somebody said they have a question. Here we go. I have a few questions on here. So first one, does a Wiro require special care? Wiros do not require any special care. They're just like Zeros. They're just like Wiblets. They're just like any other bearded dragon. Essentially, Wiros, because of the way they're produced, the only thing that causes them to be more expensive and more high quality is that takes more to produce a Wiro. You're breeding a double het to a double het, and that's a 1 in 8 or yeah, no, 1 in 16 chance to produce a Wiro. Um, so it's really hard. That's why they're so expensive. But other than that, there's nothing else different about them. They have the same quality of life. They have the same requirements. Like in the same Wiro pairing, it's a 1 in 4 to produce a Wiblets and a 1 in 4 to produce a Zero. And you cross those together because they have to overlap, obviously, to produce a Wiro. That's how you get 1 in 16. But it's really, really hard to get them. And there's probably, I want to say, maybe less than 20 on Morph Market, probably less than that, maybe less than 10 on a Morph Market right now. People selling Weirdos because they're so hard to produce. Out of 516 bearded dragons, that's a very low number. But again, red monsters are dominating the entire bearded dragon community, so there's only so much we can do. All right, the next question somebody asked on here. Line breeding is a broad term right now. What is your definition of line breeding? I feel like a lot of these dragons are distant cousins in one way or another. You're 100% right. Everything is distantly related. If you look back at humans, humans are very closely related to each other. You can do an ancestry right now, and even if you are a Caucasian and you do an ancestry, you'll find out that you have some percentage of African in you. You have some percentage of Irish in you. You have some percentage of, whatever the case may be. Even though you're a Caucasian, blonde hair, blue eyes, you might have people that in Africa, they're from South Africa, which are also white people. So that's just how it works with lineage. Now, in terms of bearded dragons, most bearded dragons came from the same group of bearded dragons, right? So somebody went to Africa, they grabbed a bunch of bearded dragons, brought them to the United States, and all of a sudden they start breeding them. Every 2 or 3 years, a new generation emerges. Bearded dragons have been around for a very long time. So if there's every 2 to 3 years, a new generation emerges and people are out crossing and outbreeding and all of that, essentially you have, let's say it's been, I want to say it's been over 50 years, but let's say it's been 50 years. And every 2 to 3 years, that's 25 to 15, 16, 17 generations that we have of bearded dragons in the United States. That's a lot of generations. I could not tell you how many people that I don't know from people that were, offsprings of somebody 17 generations ago. There's so many people that I don't know in my blood or my family tree from 17 generations ago, spread out to the left, spread out to the right. There's so many people I don't know. Are they considered cousins? Absolutely. I don't even know how far a distant cousin that would be. Like 17th cousin. I don't even. That's really far. It'll never even make a dent in your DNA or your offspring's DNA. If you don't know that they're your cousin. Obviously, I'm not saying go marry your 17th cousin or whatever, but I'm saying is it won't make any adverse effects in your offspring by having a kid with somebody that you don't know is your 17th cousin. I don't even know what the number is if you're 17 generations to the left, right, whatever the case may be. But that's essentially how it works with bearded dragons. If 25 years ago somebody had a clutch, and then they sold all the dragons everywhere, and then those people started breeding, and essentially 25, I don't know, it's 20 babies. So I don't even know what that number would be. Here, I'm just going to use my calculator because I don't know what that number would be. So that's a lot of digits. So the chances of you finding your I don't know. That would be what 17th cousin, at least 20th, 25th cousin. If we're going every 2 years, is like 1 in 9 million. So that's if there's 9 million bearded dragons out there right now, for the chances that you will find one that is related to your bearded dragon, 1 in 9 million. That's that's a lot. It's like a lot more than 9 million, but I don't really know that number because there's an e in there, and it's like 9 point something. So yeah, there's the chance of you having a bearded dragon that's related to another bearded dragon that you have, closely related anyways, is very, very slim. Like I said, just in my collection, 300, 270 dragons that I've produced. Um, let's say somebody, I mean, there's a breeder down the street, Bourbon City Exotics. She probably does 200, 300 dragons every year. None of my dragons are related to any of her dragons. Now they are. I take that back. Now they are because we did a collaboration because she wanted to produce some Thunderbolts, and I have a Thunderbolt. So one of my dragons now, because I did a pick of the litter, is from one of her dragons. So now they're related. But other than that, no other related um, that I know of. So that's just how it goes. The chances are very, very slim that your dragon's going to be related to somebody else's dragon. Um, unless you buy them from the same breeder, then the chances are not as slim. So let's see. We got some more questions. Somebody said, I've noticed that most customers on Morph Market are other breeders or potential breeders. That's very true. Now, there is a video circulating right now in the ball python community of somebody doing a podcast with Theo Vaughn, and he essentially they're saying that the ball python industry is a pyramid scheme because one person is selling to everyone else high quality, high priced animals, and everyone else that bought those animals now is also breeding to produce the same animals to sell them to other people. And essentially, the price keeps going down every generation, and the person that wins is the person that first produced that animal. Bearded dragons is the same way. It is essentially a pyramid scheme. If you're looking to breed, if you're looking to buy pets, which a lot of people do, then it's not. It's not going to bother you at all. The amount of bearded dragons that I sell for breeding purposes every year, slim. Like I want to say maybe less than 20% of people that I buy a bearded dragon from me are like, oh, maybe I'll breed. And out of the 20% that say that, how many of them actually make it to breeding? Because there's a lot of work that goes into it. And people don't understand that when they first think about it. And then once they do all the research and once they've had this dragon for 2 years and they've had another dragon for 2 years, and they're like, oh no, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to go through babies again. Babies eat too much, it costs too much, and it's not worth it. That's what usually people do. And that's how people actually end up they stop breeding after a year because they realize that it was too much work and they just can't do it again. So they sell everything, and that's essentially how it works. For me, maybe 50 dragons out of the 270 that I produce are going to be possibly breeders, and maybe out of the 50 that I sell, maybe 10 of them actually make it to breeding because the people never actually went through with it. Same thing goes with ball pythons. I probably sell this year. I probably produced maybe 120 ball pythons, and out of all of those ball pythons that I sold, I probably had maybe 5 people say, "Oh, I'm gonna use them for breeding." That's not a lot. So the only time that a customer is a breeder is when you're selling something high quality because they also want it. They also want this high quality animal so they can produce the same high quality animals and then sell the same high quality animals to people that also want to do the same thing. Eventually, down the line, the high quality animals become pet quality animals because things have gotten better and people are doing things differently. And that's essentially how red monsters have became $500 animals instead of $5,000 animals. Let's see what other questions we got. Somebody said, I guess they were talking about my lineage and the cousins and all that. It says it's a little hard, more complicated if you aren't keeping a detailed record, which is 100% true. You may be buying a yellow dragon from Yellow Room and then get one from another breeder, not knowing his was bred from there. Absolutely. So I produced, I want to say in 2022, I produced some dragons from Carolina Classic Dragons, which at that time it was before CCD sold to the person that owned Touch. What was it? What'd they go by? I don't remember what the name was that they went by, but they were out of Texas. And they were selling yellows that they got from Spain. And eventually they sold enough to where they could make enough money to buy another breeder's collection. And CCD at the time, Carolina Classic Dragons at the time, was looking to sell, and Mark took over and bought everything they had, and still using the same website and everything, and has the same contacts for wholesaling and everything. But what happened was I bought some dragons from them, and I bred them, and I sold the offspring, and I sold not all the offsprings, but I also sold the adults because now I wanted to outcross different lines. And the adults made it around and made it around, and I had bought yellow dragons from Fairy Tale, or no, Phantom, and I had bought yellow dragons from Yellow Room. And at the moment, she has Jessica Malongo from Yellow Room Reptiles. She has dragons from the female that I sold back then, and I was gonna buy a dragon from her, and I said, "Hey, by chance, I know you bought this dragon, so I just want to make sure. By chance, is this dragon from that female?" And sure enough, it was from that female. So all you gotta do is ask around. I mean, there's so much. Obviously, it's harder to ask around if you're buying from somebody that did not keep the records. But there's so many breeders out there that do keep very good records. It's not hard for you to ask those questions to figure out if your dragon is related. Like I go and when I buy a dragon, I say, "Hey, is this dragon possibly related from a dragon from this breeder?" And if they say no, I don't do any work, I don't do any business with that breeder, I don't buy anything from that breeder, then more than likely they're not going to be related. So there is a lot that goes into keeping your bearded dragons for breeding purposes, and one of those things is keeping a very, very detailed record because you never know when you're going to buy another dragon and if that dragon is going to be related to your dragon. So there is a lot more that goes into it. So 100%, you'll never know if your dragons are related unless you ask those questions before you buy. And let's see, would you ever get a Barbata bearded dragon? Had one, didn't care for it too much. Barbatas are not as bulky as central bearded dragons. They are longer, but they are skinnier because that's just the way they are. I had a 50% hybrid also, and same thing. He had a little bit more bulkiness to him, but not enough for me to say I wanted to keep doing this. So I ended up producing a bunch of 25% hybrid lines, added wiblets to it and everything, and I just couldn't get behind it because every single baby came out not skinny per se, but just they looked they were longer, so they looked disproportionate to my other dragons. So it's not something that I was looking to continue doing. They had longer heads, longer bodies, and it just, for me, anyways, they look disproportionate. So I'm not too fond of hybrids, or I'm not too fond of Barbadas in general. So there is that answer, and yeah, there's a lot of people in Asia shipping that can't ship to the U.S. because they can't import or export to the U.S. and they have very nice dragons, but that's just how it is, and we'll never we'll never be able to get every dragon out there. I have, in terms of lines that I have German lines. I have a lot of U.S. lines. Obviously, I have German lines, China lines, from those 50% red monsters that I have, and I also have a lot of Spanish lines. So there's so much stuff out there. If you do your research and do your history lesson on bearded dragons, there's a lot of lines that are actually from the U.S. that made it elsewhere, and now they're Spanish lines or German lines. So if you do your, like, for example, history lesson, I should probably do a video on this, which maybe I will. Tigers or blue bars, they originated in the U.S. from Dragon Tales Tammy, and she sold them to somebody out in Europe, which then started call. So she calls them tiger, and they started calling them blue bar, and essentially they made it back to the United States. And now there's blue bars and tigers out there, but they all came from Tammy, so they're really just tigers. So there you go. All right. How do you get a higher level of US art? So what is US art? Let's talk about that first. US art is United States Association of Reptile Keepers. I'm a bronze member. The way you get a higher level is by paying more on the membership. Essentially, they are a advocate for all reptile laws in the United States, and the only way they make money is by people becoming members. and that's how they pay their employees to continue fighting for us to be able to have reptiles. Um, there is more ways than just becoming a member. You can go on their website and you can purchase merch. I get T-shirts. I have um, really just T-shirts, but I also have a koozie. I found out that's what that was called. The koozie is the can holder, and I have a keychain. I get a lot of stickers from them every time I order a shirt. But that's what US Arc is. So if you want to, support the association out there that's helping us be able to keep reptiles, just go to usarc.com or usarc. What is it? .com? It might be .org, and it is .org. usarc.org, and you will be able to become a member if you want to. Not necessary to become a member. It's still cool to have T-shirts that have a spider on the back, or a boa on the back, or a koozie with a bearded dragon on it, or a keychain with a gecko, whatever the case may be. Um, so that's essentially what US Arc is, and why I personally like supporting US Arc. There are laws. Honestly, it feels like every year the government is trying to take something away from us, and there's like tropical states. Obviously, they're getting the brunt of it, but other states too. A lot of states are trying to just to help with those southern states having the overpopulation of exotic animals that are not native to them. They're also trying to adopt the same laws so people can't transport across state lines or import from other countries. They don't want anything like that happening, so they're trying to adopt the same laws that, let's say, Florida has, and essentially causing us to not be able to keep a lot of animals. And that's what US Arc is for, is to make sure that doesn't happen. So let's go next question. Now the questions are going to be about bearded dragon in general. So, do you think bearded dragons are capable of feeling trust with their owners? Do they have love, comfort from their owners? Absolutely. Now, I don't know if I've said this story on YouTube before. When I first got bearded dragons, I got one bearded dragon. So the story is I worked at a pet store, and I had an employee, or I had a customer come in. I wanted to get rid of their bearded dragon, and the owner, I was just an employee. The owner essentially said, "No, we don't take in animals that belong to somebody because we have to quarantine them and have to make sure they're healthy and everything." And the person was like, "Oh, well, if you don't take them, I'm just gonna give them to the person that comes through the door and wants them." And I said to myself, maybe I should take the bearded dragon. And kid you not, took a bearded dragon home. I didn't have nothing for it. I was not prepared to take a bearded dragon home. I was only making $7.50 an hour. I did not have any money to take a bearded dragon home, but I took a bearded dragon home anyways. I was 16 at the time. What year was that? I don't even know what year it was. It was a while ago. I'm not that old, but it was a while ago. So let's see. I took it home, didn't have nothing for it. The first night I had a bearded dragon. The bearded dragon slept in bed with me. The only way I could keep it warm enough was to keep it in bed with me because it was also fall, so it was like 60s outside. And even though my house was obviously heated, but I was just trying to be considerate, so did let it sleep in bed with me. And 100%, they do feel trust with their owners, and not only with their owners, but humans in general. So there are bearded dragons that even if you own them, just because they had a bad experience with another human, they're not going to care if you own them for a year, a month, 2 seconds. They don't care who you are. They don't want anything to do with humans because they've had bad experiences with humans. I currently have a bearded dragon that I got in a collection, a group, and this bearded dragon, all bearded dragons, honestly, were pretty bad in terms of attitude, and they all wanted to bite me. But 5 out of the 6 have now tamed down a little bit more. Like every once in a while, I'll grab one and they don't like it, but nothing else. This one hates me. I can't even open the door. Immediately opens his mouth, hisses, and everything. I've tried and I've tried. I don't know what I'm gonna do with her. It's probably been a month now, and she still has not tamed down after me messing with her every single day just to get her to tame down. And it's just not much I can do about it. I'll just have to keep working on it until I find somebody that wants to do the work on their own. And that's even harder to find because most people that want a pet dragon don't want a pet dragon that wants to bite their face off. So, um, yes, they do feel trust. They do trust humans. They do trust their owners. Do they love their owners? I don't know about love. I just know that they know that their owners are the ones that feed them. Their owners are the ones that give them attention and everything. And essentially, I think it's more so. trust than it is love. I think more so they know that everything that they have, everything that is their life is because of you. That's not love necessarily. It's not like a dog. A dog, even if you mistreat a dog, they will still love you. You could be as mean to a dog as possible, and they will still not know any better, and they will still love you. Now, obviously, you still have dogs out there that are mean to their just because their owners are a-holes. But that's just how it goes. I mean, most dogs that are mistreated out there still look at their owners to be the best person in the world to them, even though they were mistreated. And when you go to a rescue or anything like that, and you see one of those dogs that have been mistreated, you see how they are around other humans because now that they have been away from that and they know that humans are not supposed to be like that, they don't know how all humans are going to be, and therefore they don't trust every human. So that's essentially it's weird. It's weird how it all works, to be honest. The next question on the slide, it says, "Do you think, or do people think too highly of their bearded dragons?" Absolutely not. I've seen bearded dragons play ball. I mean, I've seen people have like, they'll have a ball that they play with their bearded dragon. I've seen bearded dragons know exactly where their house is, so they let them roam. I've seen people have bearded dragons with like a bridge from their enclosure going to the ground. The bearded dragon goes in and out all day, every day. Goes in to poop, comes out to play. I mean, that's exactly how I've seen people have bearded dragons. I had All right. So the story going back to that first bearded dragon, even though she slept in bed with me, she never pooped in my bed. She always waited for me to put her in her enclosure or put her in after I got an enclosure, she still slept in bed with me. Sue me. Um, you can't sue me for that. But or she would wait till I put her in a bathtub. And most honestly, I've had a lot of bearded dragons that not now because I have a lot more, so it's hard to put them all in bathtubs, but they would wait till I put them in a bathtub to actually use the restroom. So you can technically train a bearded dragon, and it's satisfying when that happens, which is why I love when people have pet dragons and they actually give them attention because the sky's the limit when you do that. There's so much that can be done with pet dragons because they are actually intelligent animals. They're not as intelligent as a monitor lizard. Those things are bizarre. They're bizarre. They're too intelligent to be honest. But bearded dragons are still intelligent. It's not something where you're like, oh, this dragon knows exactly who I am, which it's very likely they do know exactly who you are. But if you see somebody else that looks like you or similar to you, your dragon's not going to know who that person is. They're going to think it's you. Um, like for example, my brother looks similar to me, not exactly like me, where he's lighter than me, shorter than me, less handsome than me. I'm just kidding. Hopefully he's not watching this. But he is. He could walk in here. My bearded dragons won't know anything different because there's going to be oh look another black man. So they're just who knows. But I do know that when I'm in here, you've probably seen it in some of my videos out there where the dragons are in the back. They are scratching at the doors, trying to get my attention so I could feed them because they know that I feed them. They know that whoever's in here is going to feed them. So essentially, that's what they have trained themselves to do is wait for food. They know how to get the food, where the food comes from. They know that the door opens up and the food comes in, and that's essentially how they have lived their life. Because I don't have a way. I mean, if bearded dragons were so chill where they weren't territorial, I'd have them all just walking around here. I wouldn't even care. But that's not the case. So I have to be considerate of all the bearded dragons, and I have to keep them in enclosures. Next question. Somebody said, "My babies trust me like I'm their creator. Literally come running to me when I get home. I'm I'm their son. SUN, not SON. And even my adults I got from other breeders all react to my arrival on site. Absolutely. They know that you are the person that gives them everything that they need to live and to survive. Absolutely. So let's next question. I think we've gone over an hour now. Have you noticed some bearded dragons being smarter than others? I just talked about that. Intelligent bearded dragons are definitely out there. Dumb bearded dragons, yes. I have had some bearded dragons out there where I'm just like, yo, like, what are you doing? Like, that's not even normal. Like, so for example, in my enclosures, I have hammocks, and most dragons know what the hammock is there for. So they'll crawl up the hammock and play on the hammock and use the hammock as a slide or whatever the case may be. I have also seen some bearded dragons with the same hammocks not know how to get on it and they just crawl at the wall. It's weird, and they're almost hanging on for dear life, trying to figure out how to get on this hammock. And I'm just like, seriously, it's not that hard. Like I've seen so many dragons use hammocks similar to that, if not that same hammock, and you are here struggling trying to get on it. And this hammock's probably, I want to say maybe 14, 15 inches wide. It's not a huge hammock. It's not like they have to have any issues to get on it. It's weird. It's so weird how it goes. But yeah, there's definitely intelligent dragons out there, as well as non-intelligent dragons out there. All right. What was the prettiest dragon you have ever seen? Prettiest dragon I have ever seen was a dragon that I bought in 2015 that I owned all the way to 2016 before I started selling off dragons because I was moving and had a lot of things going on back then because a, I was a young adult and I had to move apartments and move houses and it was just harder to move with a bunch of reptiles. So check it out. I put a picture of her on here. This was Lemon. Lemon was the most yellow. I know the pictures. This was back in 2016, taken with a cell phone. The pictures don't do them any justice. This dragon was the brightest yellow dragon I have ever seen in my life. And I have yellow dragons right now that still do not touch this dragon at all. And it's absolutely crazy that dragons, how that, so bearded dragons stopped being this yellow when people started breeding them for blue bar. And the reason they started stopped being this yellow because most of the blue bar dragons were having some orange, some red in it because they were being outcrossed for blue bar. They weren't being outcrossed for color. So they started adding blue bar into yellow dragons, and essentially the yellow dragons, right here in this section, the stripes that go down the back, those became orange. Those became like a red orange color. And obviously hers are not like perfectly yellow. They're honestly like white color. That was what you got back then with the yellow, pure yellow dragon. You got no oranges down the back and slightly blue because obviously the tiger bars never really go away. But that was Lemon here. Best dragon I've ever owned. Best looking dragon I've ever owned. Honestly, if it wasn't for her, I probably would not like yellow dragons as much as I like yellow dragons now because every time I buy a yellow dragon, it's to produce that, to produce something similar to her, hopefully, or possibly in the future, produce something similar to her by keeping dragons back that I have produced. So that is essentially what I'm working towards and will always work towards until I produce it because she was the best looking dragon I've ever owned. Let's see. All right. Somebody said hashtag bring yellow back. Hilarious. All right. So I put these three questions together in the same slide because it just felt like I could answer all of them at the same time. Longest dragon in your collection. He is 20 inches, maybe 21 inches. Um, Longest dragon you have ever seen. Longest dragon I've ever seen was the longest dragon I've ever owned. He was 23 and a half inches long. I have his daughter actually. She was born in 2021, and I still have his daughter, and she's probably about 20 inches long herself. But her mom was about 18 inches long. So that's just how it works. You breed a 23-inch long dragon with an 18-inch long female. You end up with a bunch of 20-inch dragons because that's how it works. But she's magnificent looking. The longest dragon I've ever seen besides that dragon, I I can't recall because most people when they tell you to have a long dragon, they never actually send you a measurement. They only send you the weight. So the most overweight dragon I've ever seen, 800 grams and some change. Who knows how long it was, but this thing was like a plate, ridiculous. So there you go. And do I have a favorite bearded dragon? I don't have a favorite bearded dragon. Um, yeah, I do. Of course I do. Watch this. Favorite bearded dragon. People are like, oh, he doesn't have a favorite after all those. Yeah, favorite bearded dragon, Zinnia. Zinnia is the dragon I got from Phantom Dragons. She's probably from 2021. Zinnia, magnificent. She is docile as can be. I can put her with other females. She never cares. I put her with males, super submissive. I have had her since she was probably 20, 30 grams, and she is like 4 years old now. I'll probably only breed her one more year after this year, and then she'll be pet. This is typically what I do with females that are retired or males that are retired. I will sell them. This is going to be a dragon that I don't sell and I never sell. This is going to be my pet for life until she passes because I have put so much work into her in terms of the way she is. I know everything she does. I know her quirks. I know everything about her because I have had her the longest, and I know exactly what she does because I play with her all the time. She is my favorite dragon by far. I know the pictures don't show it that well, but she does have a little bit of orange down the back there. She is also super yellow in person, and those blue bars are out of this world. And you can see her baby picture, or not baby picture. She was probably 50 grams in that picture there, but super nice, super amazing dragon. Again, super docile, personality out of this world. Never gonna get rid of her because she is irreplaceable. I have her son. Her son is a complete a-hole. I have her daughter. She's great, but she likes food a little too much. So she's great until you get her food in front of her. Then she doesn't want you to do anything with her. Um, there's just it's hard to put a favorite out there, but this one by far is my favorite. And then after her, there's probably a bunch of number twos and a bunch of number threes because I couldn't just pick one out of the second place favorites and third place favorites. But number one, she's number one 100% of the time. Um, so yeah, somebody said 800 grams. Yeah, 800 grams. Those crazy. And this person, there's another breeder out there that sends me a lot of messages every so often about dragons that they see people talk about, and I'm like, that's crazy. I would never do that. But this person also buys dragons from you know subpar conditions and uses them as breeders, and I would never do that. Um, so here recently, I've started seeing his bearded dragon quality has gone down, and I'm not going to say his name, but let's just say he is having dragons with short snouts, and he's having dragons with super bulgy eyes, looking like a toad. And that's because that's what happens when you bring in subpar dragons and start breeding them, creating more subpar dragons. Uh, Honestly, they're inferior at this point because you want your dragons to be the best structure, the best everything about them, because we want to make the line better, make the species better. And I don't know about it. I would never. I'm not the type of person to. If I see a dragon, and I'm like, oh no, that dragon has good structure, and somebody is rehoming it, then that's a different story. But if I see a dragon and it's just another body to add to the breeding community, nah, I'm not doing that. That could stay as a pet. Toad eyes. Lemon fire. Lemon fire is just marketing, man. There's nothing else to it. Just like this, calling this rainbow. That's what they call yellow dragons that have orange on them and blue bars. They call those rainbow dragons. Then they also have more orange, less orange, and all that. So they call them rainbows, but it's all marketing. That's all it is. When somebody says lemon fire, I'm assuming you're talking about fire and ice dragons because they're the only ones I know that call their yellow lemon fire. But um, you I usually don't put anybody's names out there, but Fire and Ice, they are overpriced for what you get. I've seen people buy dragons from Fire and Ice. The pictures are super edited. The animal arrives and it looks like the dragon on the right, or is it your right? It might be your right. When the picture showed you the dragon on the left. And obviously these are the same dragon, but I'm just going, with examples here. So you end up paying for the dragon on the left, and then the dragon that arrives is dull yellow and ugly, and you're just like, "What? I just paid $600 for a dull, ugly yellow," and you did. And that's what happens when people edit the pictures, because a lot of people do that too. Going back to the unethical breeders, that's another thing people do. They edit their pictures to sell you a more expensive dragon, just to end up selling you a dragon that was probably only worth $200 when you ended up paying $500 for it. But that's just how people get got. And without further ado, I've been at this an hour and 20 minutes. I don't know what all you guys want to talk about, so I'm just gonna stop sharing now. And if you guys have anything you want to talk about, I'll probably do this for another 5 minutes, and then I'll be done. So because I have to put the kids to bed. It is almost past their bedtime. Usually we start going down at 8 for the kiddos because they take the longest to go down. They might take an hour, they might take 30 minutes, but they always take the longest to go down. So if you guys have anything you want to talk about, now will be the time to ask. If you think of anything later on, you can go and send me an email on at info@qbstalesandScales.com, and you can just put in the subject podcast questions and I'll ask them on the podcast. Or you can shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. And if you have any questions, then I'll answer them on there as well. So hopefully you guys like the first episode of Tip the Scales podcast, because I did not think I was going to be able to do an hour, and I did an hour and 20 minutes. So I think pretty good. Um, and the number of people watching has gone up and down. It was just 5, now it's 7. So will I be at the next Clarksville Reptile Expo, assuming the weather is okay? Oh man, honestly, I have not been able to go to one of his reptile expos one time. I have every single time I have something going on. Like I say I'm gonna go, and the day of something pops up where I just can't make it. Like one time I had a kid. One time there was ice all over the road. I couldn't even make it 20 minutes down the road. It was just there's always something, and it's just so hard to always say you're going to be somewhere and then you end up not going. It almost makes you want to not go ever again. But I will definitely try to go, depending on if I have things to sell or not. So right now I only have 3 ball pythons of babies to sell, 3 adults to sell, and baby bearded dragons have 3. And I still have to figure out that 1 adult that does not like anybody. How can I sell this dragon if it hates every single person that it comes in contact with? So that's essentially where I'm at. Crazy. And I just want to show this because bring back this hashtag. I like this hashtag. Bring yellow back. Love it, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do for the rest of my bearded dragon career. I don't know how long that's going to be. Maybe it'll be forever. Who knows? Um, obviously, you always want to be better every single year. Every single year, you always want to be better. And last year I was great. This year I hope to be better, greater, if you will. And maybe one day I won't have to worry about being greater because I'll already be the greatest. No, I'm just kidding. I don't. I'm not like that. I'm not like that at all, man. I'm not. I'm not that type of person. To I don't want to be the greatest, the goat. I want to be the greatest of all time. No, that's not me. Um, I just want to be good enough to have people trust me to buy dragons from me. Whether it be 300 dragons that I sell, 600 dragons that I sell, 100 dragons that I sell, I don't care. I just want people to trust me enough to buy bearded dragons from me, because that's what we're all hoping to do. Yes, look at this. Hashtag bring creative breeding back 100%. Don't go with the flow. Don't do what everybody else is doing. 100% do what you want to do. What do you like? What makes you happy? What makes you tick? 100% do that. I have not gotten into red monsters. I don't care about zeros. Guess who else cares about red monsters and zeros? Everybody else. I don't care. I don't care. Okay, I'll never care. Do I like reds? Absolutely like reds. Do I like yellows more than reds? Absolutely do. But the only reason I have reds is so I can make reds that I feel proud of, that aren't from red monster lines, or at least weren't. Now it's hard to find a red monster or a red that isn't a red monster. So that is essentially how it became harder for me to find reds that are not from red monster lines. So now I have to use 50% red monster females to pair with my non red monster line male. So I'll just be making 25% red monsters, which I don't care to go 50, 75%. I'm going to keep going down. After 25%, guess what? 12.5% red monster. Nobody's gonna care. Okay. By that time, they're gonna be like, why are you even putting the percentage in there? I don't even know why they're still putting the percentage now. Honestly, at this point, if it doesn't look like a red monster, it shouldn't even be called a red monster. So if you have a 50% red monster and it doesn't look like a red monster, it's not even necessary. Just say you have a red dragon. All right, not even necessary. So that's what we got going on. I enjoyed the podcast. I'm definitely looking forward to the next one. Appreciate that. I don't know when the next one will be. I don't know if I'm gonna do these every week or every 2 weeks. Um, I'll have to figure that out, because the other thing is a lot of reptile expos are on Sundays and Saturdays. So if I do these on Sundays, I have to figure out if 7 o'clock is a good time for a reptile expo because they end usually around 4 p.m. Then I got to drive home, probably getting home around 6. Do I want to immediately get after getting home after an entire day of being away from my family, go and do a reptile podcast? I'm not sure. That's something we'll have to figure out. Um, so I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen. Somebody wants to see Lucifer's red babies. Absolutely. Me too. So Lucifer was a dragon that I produced in 2023 from a Spice Dragons and Dragon Den. So Spice Dragons no longer breeds, but Dragon's Den obviously still breeds. And Spice Dragons and Dragon's Den lines were great. Paired them together, created greater lines. Because every year, what do we want to do? We want to become greater. That's essentially all I want for bearded dragons in general. Is every generation is a greater generation, not a worse generation, which people don't care about. A greater generation. So Lucifer's babies, greater, best bred babies that I'll ever probably produce. Every year I produce red dragons. I'm like, dang, these are better than last year's. So that's how I go. That's how I do it. Just every year try to be better. Every year be better than last year. Absolutely. All right. So again, close this out now. If you have any questions that you want to be featured on a podcast, email info@QBStalesandScales, and I will put it on the podcast just like I did today. There was a lot of things going on, a lot of questions. I think I had 10 questions or something like that. And so maybe next time we have more localized questions about one specific topic. Obviously, the topics today were a little bit all over the place. Red monsters, new morphs. There's a lot of things that we talked about, but let's hope that I don't know, maybe next week that we have another podcast. Maybe 2 weeks from now. I don't know when it'll be. But yeah, with that said, thank you for tuning in for Tip the Scales. As always, you guys have a great time. And you know what's about to happen because I always got to do my peace sign at the end of the live stream and at the end of my videos. So if you made it this far, I appreciate you guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. If you aren't already subscribed, like the podcast so other people can see it because that's how the algorithm works. Comment if you want. As always, peace.